Why do you cling so desperately to the immaculate image you have constructed for the world, when you know in the quietest hours of the night that it is nothing but a hollow shell designed to mask your own internal decay? You walk through your existence performing a meticulously rehearsed play, offering polite smiles when your heart is cold, and feigning compliance when your spirit secretly burns to destroy everything around you. You have been conditioned since your earliest youth to believe that your absolute availability and your perpetual need to explain yourself are tokens of moral virtue. They are not. They are the bars of a psychological prison born from an agonizing terror of abandonment, a defensive mechanism that transforms you into a predictable utility for others while you systematically abandon your own soul. You believe that by locking away your dark impulses, your intense rages and your unvarnished truths, you are purifying your nature. In reality, you are merely castrating your psychological weight and draining the very reservoir that creates your genuine magnetic presence in the world. This artificial division within your consciousness is the unrecognized architect of your chronic fatigue and your pervasive sense of inner emptiness. You have exhausted your vital psychic energy by keeping a tight lid on a boiling cauldron of repressed realities, forcing your conscious ego to operate as a submissive servant to external approval. Every time you offer a forced justification or alter your voice to maintain a false social harmony, you are outsourcing your self-esteem and giving away a fragmented piece of your life force. You look at highly magnetic individuals with a mixture of envy and fascination, wondering why they command respect without uttering a single plea, entirely blind to the fact that they have simply stopped fighting an internal civil war against their own hidden nature. This script is not a superficial motivational speech designed to comfort your fragile ego, nor is it a set of academic theories to be intellectualized from a safe distance. It is a direct, unsettling invitation to enter the subterranean vault of what I have termed the shadow. To embark on this journey means you must deliberately surrender the comforting delusion of your own total innocence and prepare to traverse the desert of profound inner solitude. The world modern society has built is incredibly loud, encouraging you to respond instantly, to react emotionally, and to edit your truth so that it remains palatable to the collective herd. But the true process of individuation, the arduous path to becoming a whole autonomous human being, demands that you step away from the crowd and learn the brutal strategic authority of your own silence. We will systematically dismantle the mechanisms of your social persona, unmask the hidden manipulation behind your compulsive compliance, and reveal how your intense irritation with others is merely the projection of your own disowned power. Prepare yourself to look into the mirror of your deepest unconscious mind, because true enlightenment does not occur by imagining figures of light, but by making your inner darkness completely conscious. 1. The anatomy of the mask and the price of total compliance. You believe your endless adaptability is a sign of psychological maturity, a benevolent gift to the harmony of your family, your workplace, and your relationships. Let us peel back the layers of this carefully cultivated kindness and confront the grim reality underneath. It is not virtue, but a profound, trembling cowardice hiding behind the respectable name of empathy. From the very moments of your childhood, you realize that the collective world has absolutely no interest in your unvarnished, raw psychological truth. It demands your submission, rewarding your compliance, while systematically punishing any spontaneous outburst of your true nature. To survive this early trauma of invalidation, you built a persona, a functional, highly sophisticated mask designed to act as an aesthetic compromise between your chaotic inner world and the rigid expectations of your environment. You learned to smile when your soul felt a chilling contempt, to say yes when your boundaries were being brutally violated, and to apologize for merely taking up physical and emotional space in the world. What you completely fail to recognize is that this very mask, constructed initially to safeguard your vulnerability from a cold world, has slowly ossified over the decades into an impenetrable personal prison. The tragedy of your current existence is that you have committed the ultimate psychological error. You have identified completely with this social artifact, genuinely believing that you are only the polite professional, the doting partner, and the endlessly patient friend. By anchoring your entire sense of self in this pristine, edited surface, you have left your psyche dangerously lopsided, entirely blind to the dark, primitive currents that continue to churn and mutate within your neglected, unconscious mind. This total identification with the persona turns you into a highly predictable creature, a psychological puppet whose strings are effortlessly manipulated by anyone willing to press your deeply embedded buttons of guilt and shame. When you are entirely predictable, you forfeit your distinct psychological gravity. You cease to be a sovereign individual and dissolve into a mere tool, a transactional emergency button that others squeeze for validation and discard the moment their emotional crisis passes. The world around you senses this absolute lack of depth with an almost animalistic instinct, treating you not with the genuine respect reserved for a formidable adversary or a true equal, but with a casual, patronizing indifference. Your desperate, lifelong campaign for collective approval has effectively castrated your innate human magnetism, because true charisma is never born from sterile perfection, but from a conscious encounter with the heavy, unvarnished totality of the self. When you present only your sanitized, agreeable surfaces to the public stage, there is absolutely nothing for another human soul to grip onto. You become a boring, flat mirror of their expectations, completely devoid of your own distinct psychic weight. The individuals who naturally fascinate and magnetize you are never those who are perfectly behaved. They are always the complex characters who carry an aura of hidden depth, a subtle, unspoken intimation that they contain vast, dangerous internal territories that they refuse to apologize for. By hiding every trace of your personal aggression, your ruthless ambition, your dark insights, and your unconventional desires, you have rendered yourself completely invisible to the world. You have traded your sacred psychological birthright of wholeness for the cheap, temporary safety of social convenience. And now you sit in the ruins of your compliance, wondering why you feel so profoundly empty, exhausted, and abandoned by life. This chronic exhaustion you carry is the direct mathematical result of the immense psychic energy your ego must continuously expend to keep the lid slammed tight on your repressed realities. You are engaged in an exhausting, round-the-clock war against your own nature, utilizing your intellect to rationalize your emotions and edit your behavior until it fits into the acceptable boxes of your social circle. This process of constant self-editing is a sophisticated form of slow, systematic auto-abandonment, a betrayal of the soul that leaves you entirely depleted at the end of every ordinary day. Pessoas que vivem emocionalmente esgotadas não são fracas. They are simply disoriented, distributing their limited vital force to a parasitic environment as if it were an infinite resource, leaving nothing to nourish their own internal center. While you are busy playing the saint in your conscious life, your rejected instincts are starving in the dark, mutating into a twisted, malicious shadow that quietly sabotages your health, your decisions, and your grandest creative ambitions. You cannot starve a vital part of your own consciousness without the poison of that repression leaking out to contaminate every single dynamic of your daily existence. The most cruel paradox of your high-strung compliance is that the very people you are destroying your peace to please will give you absolutely no credit for your sacrifice. They will simply exploit your availability until you have nothing left to offer. The collective herd does not value abundance that is given away for free out of fear. It respects boundaries, scarcity, and the formidable presence of an individual who knows how to say a firm, uncompromising no. Your habit of responding to messages instantly, of justifying your absences, and of defending your personal choices as if you owed a debt to the universe is a loud declaration of your own perceived inferiority. You are constantly begging for permission to exist, pleading with the audience to validate your performance, entirely unaware that this submissive posture breaks the implicit pact of equality in your relationships. The moment you choose to establish a boundary, to withhold your immediate reaction, or to offer a calculated, conscious silence instead of an elaborate explanation, the entire social game around you enters a state of acute crisis. This sudden crisis occurs because the opportunistic, codependent individuals in your environment have grown accustomed to using your predictability as a convenient anchor for their own unexamined psychological chaos. When you suddenly become unavailable, when you refuse to play the role of the reliable emotional caretaker, their convenient projections begin to shatter against your wall of silence, forcing them to look into their own internal emptiness. They will inevitably react with intense irritation, accusing you of being cold, arrogant, detached, or strangely altered, attempting to use guilt as a weapon to drag you back into your historical patterns of compliance. This hostile reaction is the infallible proof that they never truly loved or respected your authentic self. They merely loved your absolute utility, your willingness to be used as a mattress to cushion their own psychological falls. This realization is incredibly painful, a sharp, destabilizing rupture that forces you to choose between the comfortable slavery of your old persona or the terrifying, isolated desert of true psychological independence. To break this vicious cycle of self-betrayal, you must develop the psychological spine to tolerate the profound discomfort of being misunderstood, disliked, and condemned by those who benefited from your old, compliant version. You must consciously stop outsourcing your self-esteem to the external gaze, shifting the center of gravity of your psyche away from the periphery of public approval and back to the sovereign center of the self. This transition requires a strict, daily discipline of emotional containment, a refusal to participate in the noisy, superficial arguments of a society that is actively losing its capacity for deep, critical reflection. True power does not reside in the loud, reactive explosions of the ego. It manifests as a quiet, magnetic stillness, the absolute authority of an individual who knows exactly who they are and refuses to put their identity on trial for the convenience of the crowd. It is a slow, difficult process of personal deconstruction that demands you murder the illusion of your own total innocence and take absolute responsibility for your own life. When you finally find the courage to silence your compulsive explanations and allow your absence to speak for itself, you will witness a radical, irreversible realignment of your entire external world. Your silence ceases to be a passive withdrawal or a cowardly flight from conflict. It becomes a brutal, strategic presence that commands respect without ever raising its voice or constructing an argument. The superficial connections that existed solely because you were easy to manipulate will naturally wither and drop away, acting as a healthy, necessary filter that purifies your social environment. In that newly created internal space, free from the exhausting static of collective demands, you will finally begin to hear the quiet, authentic voice of your own soul, reclaiming the golden, vital energy you had left rotting in the dark vaults of your unconscious mind. This is the painful, magnificent threshold of individuation, the precise moment you stop living as an edited character in the narratives of others and permanently become the absolute, sovereign author of your own destiny. 2. The unconscious chasm, where repressed power goes to rot. Everything you have deemed unacceptable, shameful, or dangerous about your nature has not vanished simply because you closed your conscious eyes and refused to look at it. It has merely migrated into the profound darkness of your unconscious mind. The human psyche operates as a strictly self-regulating system of energy, and when you deny a natural instinct, its legitimate expression through the ego, that energy does not miraculously dissipate into nothingness. Instead, it accumulates in the subterranean vaults of your consciousness, forming an autonomous, highly volatile entity that grows more dense and resentful with every passing year of forced containment. This is the reservoir of the shadow, the resting place of your primitive drives, your unexpressed rages, your wild creativity, and your most potent psychological resources. By locking these vital forces away in the name of social adaptation, you have not made yourself safe or holy. You have merely ensured that when these hidden currents finally erupt, they will do so with catastrophic, uncontrollable violence. You live in constant dread of this inner wilderness, treating your own repressed instincts as an external, demonic enemy that must be conquered and kept under lock and key at all costs. This defensive, hyper-vigilant posture requires an immense, continuous expenditure of your vital psychic energy every single day, leaving your conscious ego perpetually depleted, fragile, and vulnerable to the slightest emotional storm. The chronic fatigue you experience at the end of an ordinary day is almost never a physical phenomenon. It is the sheer psychological exhaustion of keeping the trapdoor of your mind slammed shut against your own hidden truths. While you are busy playing the pristine saint in your conscious, visible life, your neglected shadow is starving in the dark, mutating from a source of raw, vital passion into a twisted, malicious force that quietly sabotages your relationships, your health, and your grandest ambitions. You cannot systematically starve a vital part of your own living consciousness without the toxic poison of that repression leaking out to contaminate every single corner of your daily existence. The ultimate tragedy of your hyper-moralistic repression is that the shadow does not contain merely your destructive or primitive impulses. It holds the very keys to your personal sovereignty, your internal authority, and your magnetic power. When you bury your capacity for aggression out of a desperate fear of conflict, you simultaneously bury your capacity for firm boundaries, courageous leadership, and unyielding self-preservation. When you lock away your darker, more intense passions to remain predictable and pleasing to the herd, you permanently extinguish your creative fire, your charisma, and your ability to inspire deep devotion in others. You have thrown the baby out with the bathwater, leaving yourself an intellectualized, sanitized shell of a human being who can reason beautifully but cannot command reality. Your repressed power is rotting in the dark, waiting for you to find the psychological courage to dismantle the false innocent persona and reclaim the gold hidden within the dirt of your unconscious abyss. Every time you choose to react impulsively to a provocation or spend hours ruminating over a perceived slight, you are actively draining your limited psychic energy into an external void. You believe you are defending your honor or proving your point, but you are actually demonstrating that your energy does not belong to you. It belongs to anyone who knows how to pull your strings. Pessoas que vivem emocionalmente esgotadas não são fracas. They are simply disoriented, maintaining alive the ghosts of past conversations and feeding dynamics that only exist because they insist on reacting. A healthy, integrated psyche is one that knows precisely how to retain its energy within the system, utilizing silence not as a submissive retreat, but as a deliberate act of sovereign containment. When you preserve your psychic force instead of scattering it to please those who do not value you, that energy naturally transforms into a powerful, magnetic field of presence that commands immediate respect without the need for a single spoken argument. The mechanism of this internal rotting manifests clearly in your everyday behavior through the insidious phenomenon of passive aggression and neurotic anxiety. Because your ego refuses to consciously acknowledge its own capacity for malice, selfishness, or dark ambition, these repressed qualities are forced to find a covert, underhanded path into the light. You express your hidden resentment through calculated silences, strategic forgetfulness, or subtle biting comments disguised as harmless jokes, all while maintaining the absolute delusion of your immaculate innocence. This internal fragmentation is the primary source of the modern neuroses that paralyze your will and empty your life of genuine meaning. When the ego distances itself too far from the self, the symbolic center of our total psychic wholeness, the soul begins to scream through chronic anxiety, panic, and a pervasive, suffocating sense of existential emptiness. You have silenced your own instinctual truth to achieve social adaptation, and the price you are paying for this false harmony is the total bankruptcy of your vital force. To look directly into this unconscious chasm requires a rare, terrifying brand of honesty that most people will do anything to avoid, preferring to sleepwalk through life behind their comfortable social masks. It is infinitely easier to point your finger outward and condemn the flaws, the arrogance, and the selfishness of your neighbors than it is to admit that you carry those exact same monstrous potentials within your own breast. Your intense, irrational moral outrages are rarely manifestations of objective justice. They are the infallible proof that your own shadow is recognizing its forbidden reflection in the mirror of the world. As long as you remain terrified of your own internal depth, you will continue to project your darkness onto external targets, remaining completely blind to the fact that you are fighting a losing battle against your own disowned soul. The moment you shatter this theatrical illusion and have the courage to say, The darkness I despise out there is a reality I must integrate in here. The projection collapses, and the energy leaking into hatred returns to fortify your center. This profound reclamation of your repressed power demands that you voluntarily enter an uncomfortable state of inner isolation, a sacred time of recollection where you learn to listen to your own voice without the polluting static of public opinion. You must learn to tolerate the guilt of saying no without offering a desperate, compulsive string of justifications to buy the crowd's forgiveness. When you refuse to explain your boundaries or defend your choices, you break the implicit pact of inferiority that has kept you submissive and predictable for decades. Your sudden unavailability and your heavy, conscious silence will inevitably disturb those who are accustomed to controlling you through your reactivity and your desire to please. They will attack your change of posture, accusing you of coldness, egoism, or arrogance. But this hostility is merely the frantic reaction of a parasitic environment, realizing that its primary source of emotional energy has permanently dried up. The ultimate break with this cycle of self-betrayal occurs when you realize that psychological wholeness is infinitely more magnetic, dense, and commanding than any artificial ideal of behavioral perfection. An integrated individual who has embraced their shadow does not need to beg for space, convince an audience, or negotiate their essence to fit external expectations. Their internal coherence communicates itself instantly and unshakably. They possess an undeniable weight because they are no longer running away from the predator within. They have integrated its teeth, its instinct, and its fierce independence into their civilized structure. This is the small but monumental break in perception that changes absolutely everything. Your true power does not reside in your ability to mimic a harmless, saintly caricature, but in your willingness to look directly into the dark chasm of your unconscious and marry its raw energy to your conscious will. Turn away from the exhausting theater of compliance, stop hiding your shadow, and allow its integrated force to reconstruct you from the inside out into a whole, unshakable reality. 3. The theater of projection. Why you hate what you secretly desire. Look closely into the mirror of your social environment and map the faces of those who provoke your most intense, visceral reactions of hatred, disgust, or unyielding moral condemnation. You believe your passionate outrage is a sacred manifestation of pure objective justice, an unyielding defense of truth against the wickedness of the world. But let us strip away this self-righteous delusion and confront the hidden mechanism of projection. The human psyche possesses an automated, unconscious defense architecture designed to safeguard the fragile ego from the agonizing realization of its own internal duplicity and hidden darkness. When an instinctual trait, an intense desire, or an aggressive potential within yourself is too threatening for your hyper-moralistic persona to acknowledge, your unconscious mind instantly projects that identical quality onto an external target. You see your own disowned soul with magnified crystal clarity in the bodies of your neighbors, your colleagues, and your enemies, remaining completely blind to the fact that you are looking at a severed piece of your own psychological reflection. Your obsessive irritation with the arrogance, the selfishness, or the cold ambition of others is the frantic, desperate scream of your own repressed shadow, recognizing its forbidden twin in the world. You spend an incredible amount of daily psychological currency judging, tracking, and gossiping about the perceived moral failures of those around you, entirely unaware that you are participating in a pathetic theatrical performance staged entirely by your own unconscious mind. Every moral crusade you embark upon, every bitter condemnation you whisper in secret, and every judgment you pass with a sense of superiority is nothing but a frantic attempt to convince yourself that the monster is entirely out there, safely contained within the boundaries of another person's life. If you were truly detached, whole, and at peace with your own internal structure, the flaws and missteps of your peers would elicit only a calm, objective assessment or a quiet, analytical curiosity, never an emotional explosion that disrupts your sleep and poisons your peace. The sheer exhausting intensity of your emotional reactions is the infallible psychic proof that your ego is trying to stone its own forbidden desires to death from a safe distance, using another person as a convenient scapegoat. Aquilo a que você resiste persiste. And as long as you spend your strength attacking the reflection in the glass, the hidden dynamic within your own breast will continue to grow more tyrannical, ruling your life from the dark vaults of your mind. This continuous loop of external projection leaves you utterly helpless, completely drained, and entirely devoid of genuine personal magnetism, because you have effectively outsourced your personal sovereignty to the very people you claim to despise. As long as your internal equilibrium, your mood and your self-worth depend on the behavior, the validation or the perceived wickedness of others, you are nothing more than a highly reactive puppet whose strings are effortlessly pulled by the unconscious complex. You cannot project your shadow outward without simultaneously projecting your vital life force, leaving yourself weak, anxious, and perpetually on the defensive in every social environment you enter. Pessoas que vivem emocionalmente esgotadas não são fracas. They are simply disoriented, maintaining alive the ghosts of past grievances and feeding toxic dynamics that only exist because they insist on reacting to the mirror. The moment you choose to stop pointing your finger outward, breaking the theatrical illusion with the radical honesty to say, "The monster I see in them is a potential I carry within myself," the projection shatters, and the energy that was leaking into hatred returns to fortify your sovereign center. Consider how often you feel completely lost, anxious, or unfulfilled, despite having access to an endless ocean of digital information, validation, and superficial connections. The answer to this modern malaise lies in the absolute loss of your capacity for honest inner dialogue, the systematic refusal to sit in silence with an uncomfortable question and allow your true voice to emerge without the static of public opinion. You have outsourced your thinking to the collective crowd, blindly absorbing the trending topics, the ideological slogans, and the mass groupthink of a society that rewards speed over depth and emotional outrage over nuanced reflection. You defend opinions that are not your own and fight battles that do not belong to you, acting as an unthinking agent for corporate algorithms and power structures that profit directly from your constant, mindless reactivity. To think critically, to dare to ask if what the crowd believes is actually true, is a dangerous, deeply uncomfortable act of rebellion that forces you to face the terrifying responsibility of your own existence. True freedom requires you to detach your worth from your affiliations, to step out of the warm mediocrity of the tribe, and to accept the profound risk of being completely misunderstood by the collective herd. Your intense desire to remain a good person in the eyes of society has driven you to seek refuge in the archetype of the false innocent, a seductive psychological trap where you view yourself as a perpetual victim of circumstance. You claim that your boundaries are constantly crossed, that your kindness is routinely met with betrayal, and that you are simply too sensitive for this cruel, calculating world, refusing to see how your passivity actively invites your own mistreatment. Let us be brutally direct. Your inability to say no, your compulsive people-pleasing, and your submissive compliance are not evidences of a holy, loving heart. They are covert strategies designed to buy safety, avoid rejection, and manipulate others into validating your existence. By refusing to consciously acknowledge your own capacity for malice, manipulation, and selfish ambition, you allow these traits to run completely rampant through your unconscious, passive-aggressive behaviors. You punish the world through calculated silences, cold withdrawals, and strategic martyrdom, all while maintaining the pristine, immaculate delusion that you are entirely blameless. This state of psychological innocence renders you completely unmagnetic, because the world never confuses harmlessness with strength. It treats the harmless with patronizing indifference and exploits them the moment they cease to be useful. To reclaim your personal magnetism and step into the fullness of your power, you must deliberately murder the illusion of your own harmlessness and make conscious peace with the predator within your soul. You must realize that aggression, when freed from unconscious reactivity and guided by a disciplined intellect, is not a destructive vice, but the raw, forward-moving psychic energy required to assert your sovereign right to exist, establish firm boundaries, and conquer the obstacles in your path. When you integrate this primal fire, you no longer need to raise your voice, plead for respect, or engage in petty arguments. because your psychological boundaries are backed by the palpable, unspoken reality of your internal force. You enter a room and impose respect through the sheer density of your presence, because the collective unconscious of those around you instantly registers that you are an individual who cannot be guilt-tripped, managed, or bent to their arbitrary will. This integration requires you to abandon your comfortable victimhood, to take absolute responsibility for your own life, and to find a sacred, creative outlet for the dark passions you have spent your entire life running away from. This path of shadow integration is the absolute foundation of what I have termed individuation, the lifelong alchemical journey of becoming a whole, autonomous, and authentic human being. It is a dangerous, deeply destabilizing process that will inevitably alienate you from the safe, uniform ranks of the collective crowd and force you to cross a vast desert of inner solitude. The herd possesses an incredibly potent, automated instinct to destroy or shame anyone who dares to drop their social persona and claim their unique psychological weight. They will use every weapon of guilt, exclusion, and emotional manipulation to drag you back into the cycle of predictable compliance, because your sudden boundaries and your heavy, conscious silence expose the depths of their own self-abandonment. You must develop the psychological spine to stand firm in your integrated truth, recognizing that the loneliness of the desert is not a pathology, but the sacred labor pains of your emerging soul. When you stop living to be understood by the crowd and begin living to be true to the total configuration of your being, the desperate need for external approval vanishes entirely from your system. You take your place in the world not as an edited character begging for a stage, but as a centered, unshakable reality that evokes immediate reverence, leaving an ineffable, unforgettable mark on everyone who crosses your path. 4. The dangerous seduction of the false innocent. You have built the entire sanctuary of your identity upon the comforting narrative that you are an absolute victim of circumstance, a fundamentally pure, sensitive soul who is simply too good for this cruel, calculating world. Let us strip away this defensive illusion right now and look at the psychological reality beneath your tears. This is the archetype of the false innocent, a seductive trap that allows your ego to enjoy the cheap high of moral superiority while evading the terrifying responsibility of your own existence. You complain endlessly that people walk all over you, that your boundaries are routinely violated, and that your profound kindness is met with nothing but cold betrayal, refusing to see how your systematic passivity acts as a loud, unconscious invitation for your own mistreatment. Your supposed goodness is not a conscious ethical choice or a manifestation of genuine love. It is a calculated retreat from the battlefield of life, born out of an absolute, paralyzing terror of conflict, judgment, and social rejection. By wrapping yourself in the white robes of helplessness, you ensure that you never have to stand on your own feet or face the consequences of a sovereign decision. Let us be brutally direct with one another. Your complete inability to say no, your chronic people-pleasing, and your submissive compliance are not evidences of a holy heart, but manipulative strategies designed to buy safety and control your environment without risk. When you pretend to have no malice, no ego, and no dark ambitions, you do not eradicate these instinctual forces. You merely drive them into the dark vaults of your unconscious shadow, where they run completely rampant through your everyday behavior. You become the classic passive-aggressive tormentor, punishing your partners, friends, and family through strategic illnesses, cold withdrawals, calculated silences, and pathetic, sighing martyrdom. You force everyone around you to walk on eggshells to avoid bruising your fragile, hypersensitive ego, subtly inducing guilt in them so they will care for you and validate your existence. You manage to dominate others through your weakness, exercising a covert, tyrannical control while maintaining the pristine, immaculate delusion that your hands are perfectly clean. This state of cultivated psychological innocence is entirely incompatible with true personal magnetism, because the collective unconscious of the world never confuses harmlessness with actual strength. A creature that is merely incapable of doing harm is not virtuous, it is simply weak, and society treats the weak with patronizing indifference at best and absolute exploitation at worst. To become truly magnetic, dense, and commanding, you must deliberately murder the illusion of your own total harmlessness and consciously acknowledge that you carry a predatory, destructive potential within your own breast. Only when you know you possess teeth do your gentle words carry actual weight. Only when you are entirely capable of a chilling coldness does your chosen presence become a rare, highly coveted gift that others will fight to retain. True morality is not the absence of the monster, but the absolute conscious mastery over it. Your exhaustion is the direct consequence of this internal division, as your ego spends immense psychic energy trying to uphold a pristine social persona while suffocating the raw instinctual truths of your shadow. Pessoas que vivem emocionalmente esgotadas não são fracas. They are simply disoriented, distributing their vital force to a parasitic environment in a desperate bid to remain accepted and understood. You respond to messages immediately, defend your personal choices as if you owed a debt to the universe, and explain your boundaries as if begging for permission to exist. By doing this, you break the implicit pact of equality in your relationships and signal your own perceived inferiority to everyone around you. The moment you choose to stop this performance, choosing the strategic power of a heavy, conscious silence over an elaborate justification, the artificial harmony of your social circle will instantly enter a state of acute crisis. This crisis is a necessary alchemical fire because it forces the opportunistic, codependent individuals in your life to confront the reality that their primary source of emotional energy has dried up. When you stop being available as an emergency button for their emotional crises, their convenient projections will begin to shatter against your wall of unavailability. They will inevitably turn on you, accusing you of being cold, selfish, arrogant, or dangerously altered, attempting to use your historical triggers of guilt and shame to drag you back into your historical submission. This hostile reaction is the ultimate proof that they never respected your authentic self. They merely valued your absolute utility. Standing firm in the face of this collective outrage requires a terrifying brand of psychological spine, but it is the absolute prerequisite for breaking your historical conditioning. To traverse this difficult transition, you must step fully into the desert of inner solitude, a sacred space of recollection far removed from the loud, superficial echo chambers of modern society. Our culture is intensely addicted to instant reactivity, constant noise, and the manufacturing of a uniform, compliant consent that actively strips the human mind of its capacity for critical reflection. By refusing to engage in mindless debates, by turning off the cellular static without a shred of guilt, and by standing firmly behind a no that needs no explanation, you reclaim your outsourced sovereignty. You detach your worth from the approval of the crowd and begin the painful, magnificent labor of listening to your own internal authority. The loneliness you experience in this liminal space is not a pathology to be cured, but the necessary crucible where your authentic identity is being systematically reconstructed. The small but monumental shift in perception that alters everything occurs when you realize that psychological wholeness is infinitely more attractive, stable, and respected than any artificial ideal of behavioral perfection. An integrated individual who has embraced their shadow does not beg for space or negotiate their essence. Their internal coherence communicates its weight instantly and unshakably to the environment. They are respected because they are real, carrying the raw, fierce independence of the predator beneath a highly civilized exterior. Stop betraying your own soul to maintain a false peace. Discard the suffocating mask of the false innocent and have the radical courage to be misunderstood by the crowd. It is only when you accept the discomfort of your total nature that you permanently step out of the script written by others and become the absolute sovereign author of your own destiny. 5. Embracing the predator within, reclaiming the energy of aggression. We must deliberately tear down the protective societal lie that all human aggression is an unmitigated moral evil, for it is precisely this superficial conditioning that has left your character completely castrated and your presence entirely devoid of vital force. Society has trained you to believe that a total absence of teeth is equivalent to holiness, rewarding your absolute compliance while forcing you to feel a paralyzing shame whenever a spark of raw, primordial indignation flares up within your chest. What you call your peaceful nature is, in the light of deep analytical psychology, nothing but a calculated paralysis, a profound terror of conflict that forces you to wear the white mask of the harmless saint while your true potential rots in the subterranean dark. Aggression, in its pure archetypal reality, is not synonymous with blind violence or senseless cruelty. It is the fundamental, forward-moving psychic energy required by the individual to differentiate themselves from the mass, conquer internal obstacles, and confidently assert their sovereign right to exist. By systematically hunting down and burying this primal fire within your unconscious chasm, you have not purified your soul. You have merely severed the very roots of your personal authority and surrendered your life to the absolute control of the collective herd. When you choose to repress this essential instinctual drive out of a desperate desire to remain accepted, liked, and understood, you commit the ultimate act of psychological self-betrayal, with severe and immediate energetic consequences. As a self-regulating system, the human mind cannot simply dissolve an instinctual current into nothingness. If you deny your capacity for aggression and outward conscious expression, that energy turns inward, transforming its sharp edge against your own mental and physical structure. This internalized, trapped fury is the hidden, unrecognized architect behind the chronic anxiety, the relentless self-criticism, and the exhausting, paralyzed depression that routinely freezes your will to achieve greatness. Your conscious ego becomes a battleground where you punish yourself for the very desires, ambitions, and dark insights you are too terrified to display to the outer world. You are expending an immense amount of your limited daily vital currency simply holding down the lid on your own power, rendering yourself entirely invisible and weak in the face of an environment that has absolutely no mercy for those who volunteer to be doormats. Pessoas que vivem emocionalmente esgotadas não são fracas. They are simply disoriented, distributing their finite psychic force to an ungrateful collective while running a domestic concentration camp inside their own minds. Look honestly at how you operate in your daily relationships. You respond to every message immediately. You construct elaborate justifications for your natural absences, and you defend your personal boundaries as if you were a criminal begging a jury for forgiveness. This submissive posture signals your absolute vulnerability to the environment, turning you into a highly attractive energetic donor for every psychological parasite, manipulator, and opportunistic character in your social circle. They can smell your terror of confrontation from a mile away, and they will deliberately press your exposed buttons of guilt and shame to keep you submissive, predictable, and useful to their narratives. Your complete lack of an integrated aggressive drive ensures that you remain a reactive puppet, an emotional emergency button that others squeeze for temporary relief and discard the moment their internal storm has passed. The dangerous seduction of this passivity is that it allows your ego to seek refuge in the comfortable, toxic archetype of the false innocent, a trap where you view your constant suffering as proof of your superior sensitivity. You wrap yourself in the white robes of martyrdom, lamenting to anyone who will listen that you are constantly taken advantage of and that your pure kindness is met only with cold betrayal, completely blind to how your lack of boundaries actively invites your own mistreatment. Let us strip away this self-deceptive illusion and look directly into the shadow of your submission. Your endless people-pleasing and your inability to say an uncompromising no are not acts of holy love, but covert, manipulative strategies designed to buy safety and control how others perceive you. Because your ego refuses to consciously own its capacity for malice, aggression, or fierce independence, these traits are forced to leak out through the back door of your behavior as passive aggression. You punish your environment through calculated silences, cold withdrawals, and strategic complaints, acting out a low-grade, underhanded tyranny while keeping up the pretense that your hands are entirely clean. To break out of this invisible prison and reclaim your personal magnetism, you must find the raw psychological spine to voluntarily exit the warm uniform ranks of the collective crowd and navigate the desert of inner solitude. Modern society is an incredibly loud, hyper-reactive echo chamber designed to exploit your instinctual shortcuts, keep your brain stuck in a fast instinctive mode, and manufacture a compliant, unthinking consent that strips you of your intellectual independence. The herd is terrified of any individual who ceases to compulsively explain themselves, because a person who refuses to offer justifications is a person who can no longer be managed through guilt or public opinion. When you establish an unyielding boundary or meet a provocation with a heavy conscious silence, you break the implicit pact of inferiority that has bound you to the mass for decades. Your sudden unavailability will destabilize the power dynamics of your relationships, causing an immediate crisis among those who depended on your predictability to anchor their own unexamined chaos. They will attack your new posture, calling you cold, arrogant, or detached. But this moral outrage is merely the frantic scream of a parasite realizing its host has permanently awakened. The alchemical turning point in your individuation occurs when you realize that knowing you possess a predatory potential is the absolute prerequisite for genuine virtue and unshakable charisma. An individual who is physically and psychologically incapable of doing harm is not a moral being. They are merely harmless, and the world never confuses a lack of claws with real strength. True morality, true weight, and true density are only achieved when you are entirely aware of the monster you carry within your breast, yet maintain absolute, conscious mastery over its expression. When you integrate your shadow's capacity for aggression, your gentle words cease to be pleas for acceptance and transform into rare, highly coveted gifts because others intuitively feel that your chosen presence is backed by a formidable, dangerous independence. You no longer need to raise your voice, construct frantic defenses, or participate in superficial social wars. The unspoken reality of your integrated force communicates itself effortlessly, imposing an atmosphere of respect and drawing others to your center like a powerful gravitational field. Do not allow your ego to intellectualize this dark descent as an abstract philosophical theory. It demands a radical daily practice of internal confrontation and courageous action. Look directly into the eyes of your disowned shadow. Dismantle the suffocating mask of the false innocent and give your repressed passions, dark insights, and sharp boundaries a legitimate creative playground in your conscious life. Stop handing over your limited psychic energy to environments that only value your utility, and learn to hold your ground even when the light of public approval burns away from you. The integration of the predator within is the precise alchemical marriage where your vital force marries your conscious intellect, allowing you to transition from a weak, reactive object in the scripts of others to the sovereign creator of your own reality. Stand firmly upon your own psychological axis, let go of the exhausting need to be understood by the collective herd, and allow the integrated gold of your shadow to forge a presence that is utterly rare, unyielding, and unforgettable. 6. The paradox of charisma. Why wholeness is infinitely more magnetic than perfection. You are desperately exhausting your life force, chasing the pristine phantom of moral and behavioral perfection, entirely blind to the immutable psychological law that perfection always alienates while wholeness intensely fascinates. Look closely at the long, draining trail of your existence. You have edited your speech, sanitized your thoughts, and suppressed your raw, instinctual drives, firmly believing that if you could only present an entirely flawless, agreeable surface to the world, you would finally evoke the deep reverence and devotion you so desperately crave. Let us dissolve this self-deceptive fantasy right now under the cold light of analytical awareness. A human being who appears to possess no flaws, no internal contradictions, and no active shadow is an unmitigated psychological uncanny valley. Your immaculate performance does not make you loved or magnetic. It makes you feel deeply artificial, untrustworthy, and profoundly detached from reality to the instinctual radar of everyone around you. When we encounter an individual who is completely scrubbed of human error, our unconscious mind instantly registers the massive, dangerous tension of the repressed shadow lurking just behind the pristine facade, and we instinctively pull back in self-defense, sensing the calculated manipulation required to sustain such a massive lie. The core conflict of your current paralysis resides in the fact that your conscious ego has mistaken harmlessness for righteousness, completely forgetting that true charisma is never a product of the intellect, but a vital manifestation of the total, integrated psyche. By driving every trace of your personal aggression, your dark insights, your sharp boundaries, and your unconventional desires into the subterranean darkness of the unconscious, you have effectively drained your character of its vital density and left yourself a sanitized, hollow shell. Perfection is a sterile, defensive intellectual fortress constructed by an isolated, terrified ego to buy safety from the crowd, whereas wholeness demands the immense, terrifying courage to contain your internal polarities without blinking. To be truly whole means having the strength to be simultaneously disciplined and wild, deeply rational and fiercely primal, profoundly loving and entirely capable of an unyielding, chilling coldness when your boundaries are threatened. When an individual integrates their shadow, they emit a rare, dense frequency of authenticity that functions like a powerful gravitational field in a society dominated by exhausted, performing actors sleepwalking behind their social masks. Pessoas que vivem emocionalmente esgotadas não são fracas. They are simply disoriented, running a domestic tyranny inside their own consciousness to keep up the appearance of compliance for an environment that will exploit them the moment they cease to be useful tools. While you are busy acting out the caricature of the harmless saint on the conscious stage, your starved, neglected shadow is mutating in the dark vaults of your mind, leaking out into your daily dynamics through the toxic backdoor of passive aggression, chronic anxiety, and sudden, destructive acts of self-sabotage. You cannot systematically choke the vital drives of your own unconscious abyss without a suffocating poison contaminating every relationship, professional endeavor, and personal dream you attempt to construct. Your absolute inability to say an uncompromising no is not an act of holy grace, but a manipulative, covert strategy designed to buy temporary safety and force the world to validate your fragile identity. Because you are too terrified of conflict and collective rejection, you express your disowned malice and hidden resentment through calculated silences, cold withdrawals, and strategic complaints, acting out a tyrannical control over those close to you while maintaining the delusion that your hands are entirely clean. The collective herd demands your constant availability and your compulsive self-explanations because an individual who refuses to offer justifications is a dangerous mystery that can no longer be managed through guilt or public opinion. When you establish an unyielding boundary or meet an opportunistic provocation with a heavy, conscious silence instead of a frantic defense, you break the implicit pact of inferiority that has bound you to the tribe for decades. Your sudden unavailability will inevitably cause an acute crisis among those who are accustomed to using your predictability as a convenient anchor for their own unexamined internal chaos. They will attack your change of posture, calling you cold, arrogant, or egoistic. But this hostility is merely the frantic scream of a parasitic environment realizing that its primary host has permanently awakened. Modern culture is an incredibly loud, hyperspeed echo chamber, meticulously engineered to keep your brain stuck in a fast, instinctive mode, bombarding you with constant information to paralyze your capacity for deep, critical reflection. The alchemical marriage of your individuation occurs when you realize that knowing you possess a predatory, dangerous potential is the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for genuine virtue and unshakable authority. True morality, true charisma, and true density are only achieved when you are entirely conscious of the monster you carry within your breast, yet maintain absolute, deliberate mastery over its expression. When you integrate your shadow's capacity for aggression, your gentle words cease to be submissive pleas for acceptance and transform into rare, highly coveted gifts, because others intuitively feel that your chosen presence is backed by a formidable, independent power that is entirely capable of walking away forever. Stop handing over the limited capital of your vital force to environments that only value your utility, and learn to hold your ground firmly, even when the light of public approval turns away from your axis. The integration of the predator within is the precise alchemical moment where your life force marries your conscious intellect, allowing you to transition from a weak, reactive object in the scripts of others to the absolute, sovereign creator of your own reality. 7. Individuation. Navigating the desert of inner solitude. Why do you harbor such a paralyzing systemic dread of walking completely stripped of external consensus, choosing instead to systematically dissolve your unique potential into the safe, gray mediocrity of the collective crowd just to escape the terrifying weight of your own soul? You have spent your entire conscious existence operating under the seductive, toxic illusion that belonging to the herd is an act of moral righteousness, a virtuous victory that validates your submissive compliance and rewards your absolute personal availability. Let us forcefully shatter this self-deceptive facade right now under the unyielding light of analytical awareness. Your desperate, lifelong urge to merge with the mass is not a manifestation of love or social empathy, but a primitive, unconscious flight from the agonizing responsibility of becoming a differentiated individual. The true process of individuation, the arduous lifelong journey of integrating your disowned shadow, unmasking your suffocating persona, and standing firmly upon your own psychological axis, demands that you voluntarily enter a vast, unforgiving desert of inner solitude. This liminal crucible is never a place of passive, whimpering loneliness, but a necessary, profoundly painful space of absolute isolation, where the old, conditioned identity must be deliberately starved to death so that the sovereign self can finally rise. The collective herd possesses an incredibly potent, automated, and predatory instinct to destroy, shame, or domesticate any individual who dares to drop their historical mask and claim their independent psychological weight. Your sudden boundaries, your strategic unavailability, and your firm refusal to offer compulsive self-explanations will act as a direct, deeply insulting critique of the crowd's internal cowardice and systemic self-abandonment. They will instantly deploy every weapon in their psychological arsenal: subtle gaslighting, moral outrages, dramatic interventions, and calculated social exclusion to force you back into your designated role as the predictable, easily managed pleaser who routinely sacrifices their peace for the convenience of others. If you collapse under this intense social pressure out of a childish craving for easy validation, your psyche will fracture even more deeply than before, punishing your cowardice with a suffocating existential depression that signals the total bankruptcy of your vital force. You must find the raw, unyielding internal spine to endure this collective storm, understanding that the systemic loneliness you experience in the desert of individuation is not a pathology to be cured, but the sacred labor pains of your emerging wholeness. In this isolated crucible, far removed from the constant polluting static of public opinion, trending metrics, and digital distraction, you are finally forced to confront the baseline patterns of your unconscious conditioning. You will realize with chilling clarity that the voices of judgment, guilt, and shame that scream within your mind during moments of unavailability are not your own authentic thoughts. They are the introjected demands of parents, teachers, and a conformist society that you have mistakenly adopted as your internal authority. The fast instinctive shortcuts of your brain will constantly tempt you to react, to defend your stance, and to beg the audience for forgiveness, because remaining a helpless victim feels infinitely safer than standing as a dangerous, sovereign individual who holds teeth within their civilized structure. Every single time you master these reactive impulses, choosing a heavy, conscious silence over a frantic rationalization, you break an invisible thread of submission and consolidate your personal sovereignty. True authority is forged only when you accept the profound risk of being entirely misunderstood, rejected, or even despised by those who previously benefited from your exhaustion and your compliance. This path of internal alignment demands that you stop treating your dark instincts, your primal aggression, and your fierce independence as sins to be locked away in the subterranean darkness of your consciousness. Your shadow is not a collection of malicious flaws to be tolerated. It is the raw, unrefined, alchemical gold that contains the very life force required to animate your creative purpose and project an undeniable magnetic charisma. When you integrate these disowned aspects of your total nature, you cease to be a predictable, flat tool on the stage of human interaction and take up space as a complex, multidimensional reality that evokes immediate reverence without raising its voice. Wholeness is infinitely more attractive, stable and commanding than any artificial ideal of behavioral perfection, because perfection is a sterile, defensive lie born out of fear, while wholeness is a vital expression of an integrated psyche that refuses to apologize for its existence. Stop betraying your own soul to maintain a false external harmony, discard the suffocating robes of the false innocent, and have the radical courage to sustain your silence in the face of the crowd's frantic demands. The monumental break in perception that permanently alters your relationship with reality occurs when you realize that the solitude of the strong is not a pathology to be cured, but the ultimate foundation of true psychological freedom. When you cross this threshold, your unavailability is no longer a temporary flight or an immature rebellion. It is a declaration of absolute self-respect and an unshakable boundary that commands the world to treat you on your own terms. You will inevitably lose people who only valued your transactional utility, but you will finally encounter the genuine, hard-earned truth of your own essence, transforming your presence into an oasis of authenticity that naturally filters out the parasitic, manipulative dynamics of your historical life. The center of gravity of your psyche shifts permanently from the periphery of public approval back to the sacred center of the total being, where you are no longer a reactive object moving to the strings of your environment, but the sovereign creator of your own destiny. Step boldly into the desert, stop hiding your shadow, embrace the strategic power of your silence, and allow your integrated wholeness to reconstruct you into an unshakable reality that the world can no longer control, yet can never forget. 8. The alchemical marriage. Turning your inner demons into sovereign power. True psychological mastery does not conclude with the mere recognition of your shadow. It requires a profound alchemical marriage, a conscious synthesis where the ego and the darkness unite to form a transcendent third entity. You must permanently stop viewing your shadow as a collection of shameful flaws that must be tolerated, and begin treating it as raw, unrefined psychological gold that must be consciously directed into your reality. Your envy, when properly understood and integrated, ceases to be a petty, bitter emotion that poisons your relationships. It transforms into an incredibly precise compass that reveals your true, unfulfilled creative potential and hidden ambitions. Your anger, when freed from unconscious, impulsive reactivity and guided by a disciplined, conscious intellect, becomes the sharp, clean sword of absolute discernment that slices through social illusion and protects your sacred focus. Pessoas que vivem emocionalmente esgotadas desperdiçam essa energia em discussões inúteis, enquanto o indivíduo soberano a retém dentro do sistema para consolidar sua presença e impor respeito sem dizer uma única palavra. This alchemical process requires a continuous daily practice of internal confrontation, a radical psychological dialogue where you look directly into the eyes of your inner demons and discover what they truly require from you to cease their internal sabotage. You will discover that your shadow does not want to destroy your life. It merely wants to stop being ignored, buried, and starved of its legitimate right to exist within your consciousness. When you give your dark instincts a conscious, creative, and strategic outlet, whether through uncompromising professional boundaries, ruthless execution of your purpose, or radical personal honesty, the chaotic, destructive nature of the shadow naturally dissolves. What remains is pure, concentrated life force, an immense reservoir of psychic energy that completely saturates your physical presence, rendering you utterly captivating, rare, and magnetic to the world around you. By ceasing to stay available for everyone else's emotional emergencies, you finally save the necessary capital of your soul to fuel this inner transformation. The sovereign individual is someone who can operate effortlessly in the light of civilized society while remaining entirely comfortable with the primordial dark of the deep psychological jungle. They are not trapped in either extreme. They have integrated both polarities into a magnificent, terrifyingly complete psychological wholeness that evokes immediate reverence from the environment. When you reach this stage of your individuation journey, the desperate need for external validation, constant self-explanation, and social permission vanishes entirely from your system. You break the implicit pact of inferiority that kept you predictable and submissive for decades, realizing that your value does not reside in your utility to others, but in your unshakable alignment with your own truth. You move through the world with the absolute weight of a centered being, rooted deeply in the dark soil of the unconscious, while reaching boldly into the light of absolute awareness. The modern world is structured as a loud, hyper-speed distraction machine precisely to prevent you from achieving this internal synthesis, encouraging you to scatter your energy sequicker in instant reactions and tribal conformity. Society profits from your exhaustion, conditioning you from childhood to believe that being perpetually accessible and giving away your peace is a virtue when it is actually an invisible prison. But when you conserve your energy, establish a strict indisponibilidad consciente, and refuse to put your identity on trial through compulsive explanations, you break the algorithms of control. Your silence becomes a spiritual exercise of remaining whole, an implicit declaration that you owe no justifications to the crowd to exist on your own terms. The old conditioned self that lived to please must be voluntarily sacrificed in the desert of inner solitude so that a rare, unyielding charisma can permanently take its place. You have stood at the edge of your own internal abyss for far too long, trembling with fear and clutching your polite, artificial mask as if it could save you from the inevitable demands of your own soul. You now know with absolute, agonizing clarity that every single compromise you make to keep the world comfortable is a slow, deliberate act of psychological suicide that starves your magnetism and empties your life of true meaning. The illusions of your harmless innocence and your forced compliance have been permanently shattered. You are fully aware of the monster you carry within, and you understand that your only path to freedom is to look it directly in the eye and integrate its raw, sovereign power. There is no turning back to the comfortable sleep of the herd without totally destroying your self-respect. The choice before you is brutal, terrifying, and completely unavoidable. You will either have the immense courage to contain your total, integrated darkness and become a force of nature, or you will remain a forgotten, compliant shadow of a human being who never dared to truly exist. If this deep descent into the mechanics of your disowned soul has completely shattered your illusions and awakened the hidden authority you have spent a lifetime burying, you have already begun to step out of the collective trance that keeps the masses blind, exhausted, and easily manipulated. Do not allow this vital psychic fire to cool down into passive comfort. Have the radical courage to sustain this tension and solidify your psychological independence. Subscribe to this channel immediately to ensure you never lose your center to the constant noise of the crowd, and share this direct confrontation with those rare individuals who possess the spine to handle the truth. Leave a comment below with the specific statement, "I choose to be whole, not perfect." Let us see how many of you possess the rare determination required to stop hiding your shadow, murder your false innocence, and permanently claim your absolute right to be true. Your true transformation has only just crossed the threshold. The unconscious mind never sleeps, and the next video appearing on your screen right now is essential for the continuation of your journey. Watch it immediately.